All logo design starts with thinking through an idea. Once you've captured a solid concept, you have to produce the graphic art to carry it forward into an actual logo design, and this requires vector craftsmanship. I like to say practice doesn't make perfect, process does. Because if you practice the same flawed methods over and over, you only get good at creating marginal results. The process I want to share with you now is one you can use for a lifetime that will only improve your results over time. And once again, a drawing is going to reinforce and facilitate this process. This was for a client based out of the UK. He's a video producer, and he kind of has a self-titled moniker called Lord Mod. And his approach to my branding brief that I gave him was that he just said, I just want it to be so cool, people want it on a t-shirt. And I replied to him saying, I think I can pull that off. So that's a fun project to work on. So in this case, I wanted to go over the top and just create this like really cool image. So this was the ideation I came up with. And it was the type of project where I didn't do multiple iterations. I didn't come up with 5 different logo concepts. I just came up with one and sold it to him, kind of like those Saul Bass stories you hear of Days Gone By, or Paul Rand, where he pitches the next logo to Steve Jobs and said, no, this is your mark. That's kind of how I handled this. Now, this client is a little unique in that respect, but he loved it. He went for it. And I want to show you how I built the artwork, because once again, you come up with a great idea, you need to follow through it and create great artwork that's going to capture that idea and do it precisely. So on a drawing like this, I set the opacity to about 20%, lock the layer, and this is just so I don't move it. And then on a layer above it, I usually call it building, as shown here in the layers palette. I'll go in now, and then with the pen tool, I want to go to my graphic styles, and you can see I have graphic styles set up here, and all this does was it sets the line to a magenta, and this is usually how I build, and I use magenta just because it's a color that I really won't use for anything else, and this is where you'll want to zoom in, and you can pick anywhere to start. In this case, I'm just going to start building with the pen tool on my art like this. And notice I'm not worrying about the curves because I can go back in the next phase and adjust the curves. I'm more concerned about placing my anchor points exactly where they go. And this shape couldn't be easier because wherever the shape comes to a point gets a point. This is an easy one to discern. I'm going to select the anchor point tool in Illustrator here and just bend the path into place. Now, you have to have CC or above to use this tool. Older versions of Illustrator, this functionality won't be in there. Now, even though I use this tool, I have to be honest with you and tell you that in my day-to-day work, I never use this tool. It's because I prefer a plugin for Illustrator called Vector Scribe, and it has a specific tool called Path Scribe, this one right here. And I use this because if I double-click it, you can see how I can customize it. This is why I use it. I make it behave the way I want it to, and it works the same way. I can grab a path and distort it, but it has a lot more sensitivity than the one built into Illustrator. Now, you can use either. It's your choice. But in this course, you're going to see me go to Vector Scribe and use their plugin a lot because, in my opinion, it just works better. And I'm going to show you a few examples of that upcoming, but there's also some great features that come with this plugin that you just can't do in Illustrator. But either way, this is how you would go about building this specific artwork. Let's get this to a point where you can see it easier. So that's how I would build that path. Now, when it comes to something more organic, such as the eye here, this is even easier. This is where you can just simply get an elliptical shape, and we can just quickly build this eye or the pupil of the eye. Then we can go ahead and just create another shape with the same tool. And I would just go in and start moving my anchor points to get that exact form that I have captured in my drawing. and carry it forward in my vector building. So you can see how fast it goes if you just think in shapes. That's the key here, is thinking in shapes. Now, when you're creating other components, such as this eyebrow, this is where you'll have to discern where to put in your anchor points. And I just pull out the Bezier handles just far enough that I can see them, but I don't worry about forming the whole path. Once again, I'm just trying to get the anchor points in the right location. And I will build this path, and I'll go back, and then I can start playing with it. Now, this is one reason why I don't use Adobe's. You can see how it changes and moves the paths on the other one. I don't like that feature. This is why I go to this one, and then I can pull this, and it doesn't move that top one. And then if it breaks the anchor, like this is no longer smooth, I can pull this down, and you see how the S appears. It fixes that curve, and now it handles it the way it should. So I'll just go back in, and I'll adjust these Bezier curves like this. Notice how this white thing shows up? That's what's called a ghost handle. It's another nice feature with this plugin, and I can just pull that really quickly. So it makes the whole process go a lot faster, and in my opinion, it's far more precise than the tool provided in Illustrator. But that said, the same principle, the same methodology is going to work either way. And actually on this one, I go back in and adjust this kind of like that. So that's all I'm talking about in terms of building precisely. Now, if we go back to our layers, let's jump to we're going to turn this off. I'm going to turn this layer on. And you can see how I built the hat, and I built the shape that makes up his right claw down below. Now, this is what I call rough building, this stage. This is all I do initially. Then I'll go back and I'll shape them, which means I'll go back and I'll use the tools such as the anchor point tool here, or if you're using the plugin, you can use Path Scribe, and I'll bend those paths to form the actual shapes I need. And this principle that I'm using here to discern where to place anchor points is what I call the clockwork method. So if we zoom in on the eye here, you can see that at the top here, this represents a 12 o'clock, a 9 o'clock, a 6 o'clock, and a 3 o'clock. But it was based off of the initial elliptical shape that I created. And as we zoom out here, you can see if you look at this clock and the color coding for the various points on the clock, this is how I discern where to place my anchor points. Now, anytime your art comes to a point, it gets a point. Those are easy to discern. But when you get into more organic shapes that have curves and forms, it gets a little trickier to figure out where do I place my anchor points. If you think of a clock in terms of the shape association, it's going to help you figure that out. Now, this is a very quick overview of this process. To see this in more in depth, make sure to check out my original Drawing Vector Graphics course. And there's some nice animation within the movies of that course that really define this process well. So we're going to move forward here, and this shows all the base vectors for this design. And then once I get to this point, I can start selecting different points like the hat here and the brim, and I'll fuse them together using Pathfinder. So I'll do just some simple shape building techniques until I have my final art shapes built. I'll colorize it as shown here. And now the next thing I want to show you is how you can combine the clockwork method with simple shape building. Now, this design, Lord Mod, was a fun one to work on, but the next one was one of my personal favorites of late, and it was for my favorite podcast called The Futility Closet. So this shows my rough sketch, and this shows just some basic anchor points. Now, if you look at this shape, this one was very freeform in nature. It's not geometric in how it was created. The only points that come to a point are right at the tip of his beaks, on the top and bottom, and on the inside of his mouth. Everything else I had to discern, where do I place my anchor points? And once again, the clockwork method helped me to discern how to place my anchor points, where to place my anchor points. And so it's a simple process. Think of it as a Jedi mind trick for doing vector art. That's all it is. It's about thinking in shapes and discerning where to place your anchor points. Now, in a design like this, it's not hard if you also combine with freeform shapes, such as the inner detail of his body here. This is a very free-form shape, especially where his fin is going down to the bottom. But when it gets up to the top, I want it to be very geometric because he's wearing a monocle, and I wanted to base it perfectly centered off of that. So I combined a free-form shape with the geometric shape, and then I just use Pathfinder to fuse them together. Now, notice when you do this, it creates extra anchor points like this. This is where I like to use the Path Scribe tool. So we're going to open this up, and you notice it has this tool. This is a Smart Remove Anchor Point feature. Now, I can remove anchor points by going up here in Illustrator and clicking this, but notice how it messes up your artwork. It doesn't do it smartly. So let's Command Z. I'm going to click this, and you can notice how it removes it using PathScribe, and it does it smartly, and it retains the quality of my art. So that's why I use that plugin. It just works really great. So that's how I'll combine both geometric shape building and freeform building point by point using the pen tool to form the shapes needed. Now, that's not to say that I don't have other simple basic shapes such as the monocle. I have this shape. I have the inside of the monocle shown here. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to select this monocle shape, and I've made a clone of it, Command C, Command F. If I pull this off, you can see there's a copy of it there. I'll select this kind of highlighting that I have made up of two rectangle shapes, and I'll just go to Pathfinder, and I'll go intersect, and then that's how I'll create those shapes. So simple shape building techniques. I created the inline that's the kind of the cord that comes off the monocle and falling down over his shoulder just by using a simple shape and offsetting it using the offset feature. So if you select a path and you go up to Object, you can go to Path and you can go to Offset, and then you can set it for how many ever offsets you want, one after the other. And that's how I created all the base shapes needed, in this case, to form my black and white artwork as shown here. So once I have it at this point, it's just a matter of doing some color exploration. Here's the color mark and the final logo design itself. So building precise vector art for logo design isn't necessarily hard. It just takes purposeful determination to adhere to a systematic process. The end result is impeccable logo design crafted with precision and care. Once again, make sure to check out my Drawing Vector Graphics course, which has more helpful movies on the Clockwork method and how to construct your vector art in this fashion.